Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Rob Dwyer, and you are listening to episode 2 of Next in Queue. I am really excited today to have my special guest, Trevor Clark, who is the founder and CEO of ShyftOff, to join me. So welcome, Trevor. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Rob. Really happy to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of how you actually can meet people on LinkedIn that are worth talking to.
And in a pandemic.
Yeah, and in a pandemic. A lot of people talk about how, people will hit them up on LinkedIn and they get annoyed by it. But I actually reached out to you on LinkedIn after reading an article that you wrote. This was back in April, I believe. And I was really just curious to learn more about your business, just because I like to keep up on these things. And so we got to talking, and we talk relatively often these days. And so it's been great. And I'm really happy that we've been able to get to know each other a little bit. And now we get to know each other even more.
Yeah, me too. It's nice to hear somebody read an article that I wrote. That's cool.
I confess I'm kind of nerdy like that. I do read articles, and yours was really good. So let's talk a little bit about where you are from and kind of where you're coming from. So you're down in Florida, right?
Yeah, I live in Tampa right now. I've been in Florida my whole life, so there's not very many of us that go back 6 generations. Florida, it's not something I often brag about, but I grew up in Ocala, which is, if you know of it, it's like a really famous horse town. But when I was growing up there, I didn't realize it was known for horses or anything. And I lived in Orlando for a bit, Gainesville for a bit, and moved to Tampa about 2 years ago. Tampa is, in my opinion, the best place in Florida to be. So I really like it here. So it's really growing a lot too.
Yeah, I love Tampa. Ybor City is just a great little place. And, being out there and getting a Cubano, that's good stuff. It's very good.
It's such a cool little town. When we have visitors come in town, we'd make sure that's a stop, because, if you like great Spanish food, they've got the Colombia down there, which is just an experience. And then, like the old cigar factories and amazing coffee. I mean, oh my gosh, I might go over there after this and go have one.
Yeah, I'd like to say that little restaurant is amazing, but it's not little. It's actually a really large restaurant.
It's massive. Yeah. There's rooms upon rooms. I've been there probably 3 or 4 times, and I think I discover a new spot in there every time there. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So you went to UCF, is that right?
Go Knights, yeah.
Yeah.
National champions 2018.
Yeah, they're undefeated season, which only UCF recognizes as a national championship.
It's on the stadium. It's actually written on the side, just like any other deserving national championship team.
I mean, hey, there are flaws in the model, and they absolutely deserved an opportunity. So I say go for them. So you went for the really, really exciting degree at UCF. Is that right?
You mean finance, the best degree there is? Yeah. Yeah, I love numbers. Like I love finance, I love business. That's really, so here's the story on that. I didn't know exactly what path to take when I went to college. I started off thinking marketing or sales, but that was really early, and so I decided the best thing to do was to go right into internships. So I ended up spending a lot of time during college in internships. And so the first internship I had, I was very, very green, very new. I looked around, I looked at the accounting department. I thought, wow, that's really where the movers and shakers are. So they know everything about the business. I kind of, obviously they do, but I got into accounting the following year thinking that's really an interesting place to go, because I always wanted to know the root of the business. I wanted to make decisions. I wanted to be part of how it operated and how it grew. I wanted to be integral, right? And I thought accounting, that's where it should be. Now I went into accounting. I love accounting in some ways, but I just found that I didn't love how black and white it was. It was just, there was not much room for creativity. And so then I said, well, those finance guys over there, they're having a lot of fun. They're, running models and then making decisions on the forefront of the business, not just, reflecting on what's already happened. And so long story short, and it's not really a great story, but I just sort of, Plinko boarded my way into finance, really loved it. And what it gave me is an opportunity to really just get underneath the hood on business. So when I got my first job out of college, having that finance background and then also having this sort of curiosity about how the business worked, I started working at a call center, but in a business analyst type of role. And so now looking back, what a perfect place to be an analyst is at a call center, because it's just one giant puzzle and math problem and business problem. So I had a ton of fun, needless to say, and kind of just nerded out really on the whole industry, and I still am. So it worked out pretty well.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm glad you didn't get into creative accounting, because you'd probably be in jail right now. So I'm glad that you went the direction that you did. So that business analyst role, that was with telecom, right?
Yeah, I started off in telecom at Frontier Communications. That was it was an internship that turned into a full-time job. So for anybody that's in college, I always think, get that degree, but don't just do that. Go in there and just start working, and it opens a lot of doors. So I was very fortunate. I worked for Frontier in the call center group, and then that sort of led to more opportunities, even some entrepreneurial projects, and really exciting stuff. So I feel very fortunate to have landed there straight out of college.
So what was your favorite part, or I guess favorite role, or what did you get the most excitement out of while you were there with Frontier?
So the very beginning, I kind of started off on budgeting. So budgeting is an interesting exercise because you're thinking forward, and it's really, I think it's annoying to most departments, because I'm knocking on the door saying, hey, what's your budget? Let's get your numbers together, or hey, you overspent, something like that. It's not very fun for everyone else, but it's kind of fun for me, because you get to, when you start off running the numbers for planning, you end up in a really important position for strategy. So then you think, well, I've got this many resources, I need to accomplish these goals. What's the best way to do that? And so to me, that just, that was probably the most interesting part, that sort of evolved into, more and more planning and strategy and analytics and curiosity, all the things that sort of kind of sparked my development in this particular industry. I also thought forecasting was an interesting thing to explore, right? Like, why do I think this is going to be the future, and how do I know? And then the other reason it's important is, well, I'm going to be held accountable if this thing's wrong. Right. So I need a really good reason for why I'm saying that this should be our plan. And so I'm just always, I'm always trying to understand sort of where the end goal, we're to get to the end goal, but then also sort of do as much as I can to understand how to get there, and why I think the path we're on is the right one. And I think in general, that's business, that's entrepreneurship, that's leadership. That's how you should be thinking, or at least that's how I think. Anyway, I might have missed the end of your question, but that's kind of where my head is on it. Yeah.
No, I love that. I think a lot of people in the contact center space often are not thinking about the budget, and that's okay. It may not be their role to think about the budget or think about budgetary constraints or the financial goals of the organization, but a lot of the decisions that are made, whether they revolve around staffing, marketing, new technologies, whatever the case may be, like all of those start with the budget, right? This
Yeah.
is this is how much money we plan to make. This is how much money we plan to spend, right? And keeping track of that and making adjustments along the way is critical to a business's ultimate success.
Yeah. And really, it forces you to solve problems. Like, so if you're trying to, if you know where you're going, where your North Star is, well, it forces you to actually build on where you are today. I mean, I don't know that there's many really good planning sessions that start off saying, well, we're just going to coast, you know, just
No.
keep kicking my feet up, and this is where it's going to go. And fine, that's an interesting thing. It's not that interesting from a planning, and I need more activity. So I look at it and say, all right, what could we do? Like what would be really amazing? And so it forces you to get creative. And so to your point with cost and revenue and all these things that are core to your business, you start thinking, well, how could I be a better partner for my clients? Or how could I, or if you're direct to your customers, you're more of a consumer, how do I increase the funnel or increase my conversions or retain more customers and then you look at the other end and you say, well, could I do this more efficiently, or is there some technology I can invest in that makes me better, or in some way, whatever the goal may be. And so to me, that's really exciting. Then you start thinking about what's possible, and to me, that's how we kind of move forward in any industry. And you have to be thinking that way, or someone else will, and it probably won't be you, right? So
Right.
so I think of it, to me, that's kind of where all the creativity and growth and opportunity sort of starts for a business, and how do you think about the future.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a great segue into discussing your current venture, ShiftOff, because that was how I, reached out to you because you wrote this article, and I was like, hmm? So, tell us a little bit about how ShiftOff works and kind of what separates what you're doing from the traditional call center model.
Yeah, so ShiftOff really is uh, think of it as a technology platform that connects call centers and contact centers to the gig economy. And Uber is a great example of how a gig economy model can work. Um, the genesis of this idea, I mean, I actually had this sort of thought, and many of us did. I'm not alone. That when Uber started to come out, and we started to see how that was working, and actually it was really great. Um, I thought, wow, call centers really it could use something similar. We have peaks and valleys in demand, and you have typically a fluidity and volatility in what the customers need that doesn't match at all what an individual needs in their life. So I don't think fluidity and volatility go hand in hand with a person's career. And so we looked at it. I always think there's a mismatch in the way we operate call centers to basically be there for our customers. And I experienced that firsthand when fast forward a few years when I was doing workforce management at Frontier. I actually left Frontier after like 7 years, and then did a stint at a biotech company doing finance, more pure finance, not really call centers, but I had a lot of fun there. And then went back and did some more call center work for Frontier. And I was like, kind of expecting to come back into the call center industry, and somebody had figured this out by now. We're already, we're shaping demands, like we're way more efficient. And I looked at it and I said, well, I'm still having this issue where I can't actually meet my demand, or there's certain days where I've got really low productivity, and other days where I'm queuing up for not hours, but longer than I'd like to be.
Right.
And so I just like, well, man, I still think this would work. And so not being able to shake the idea, and fortunately having met my co-founder Ty, he and I just started talking about this, and it's interesting when you think Ty's background. He doesn't come from call centers, and so in fact that's probably a really good thing, because we were able to come up with some really interesting solutions. And in fact, we took a lot of the models that you see in the energy sector, where he was actually part of buying and selling. I'm not going to be able to describe his world very well. It's still sort of like, this puzzles me, but when states like Texas, where the energy markets are a little bit more open, you can switch your energy provider kind of like you switch insurance providers. And so those companies to be profitable, they've got to be really good at forecasting demand and not staffing to it, but because there's not people that's buying energy.
Right.
And the way they sort of match that up, because they have to have a perfect match on the demand to the supply, otherwise they go out of business. And so we, obviously it's not a human thing where you're not doing the same thing with a human, but we can do it with a gig economy model where we create peaking algorithms that help us sort of stay, as close to that curve as we can. And again, you get the better customer service performance, lower queue times, and lower cost. And then specifically today, I mean, a lot of people really want to work these kind of jobs. And so I think it kind of takes some of the pressure off of internal teams to like put people in roles where they don't want, or schedules where they don't want them, and that triggers attrition. But this gig economy, they want to work at 6 p.m. or for an hour in the morning. So I see it as a solution to a lot of problems. And so anyway, we developed some technology. We started testing it and brought in a couple clients actually that were really excited about what we were doing. And we told them, we said, hey, look, we haven't done this yet. Do you want to, are you okay with it? And they're like, yeah, this is great. Let's try it. And so, we use that as an opportunity to really dial in sort of what worked. Really happy with the results, really happy with, I think, the opportunity in this particular space within contact centers. And so now we're really just looking at, growing and doing a really good job with our clients.
That's awesome. You touched on a number of things that I think are worth exploring a little bit more. One of those things is just the complexities of workforce management. I think people who work in contact centers that aren't involved in workforce management are either really bored by it, or that's the department they don't like, because that's the department that's asking them to change their schedule, add extra hours, go home early. It maybe is in charge of approving or denying time off that they might need, or whatever the case may be. But you talked about it earlier, like it's this huge puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's really complex. And I think a lot of people who aren't necessarily in the contact center industry don't necessarily understand that. So what were some of the things that you learned when you were working in workforce, aside from just the fact that, it's hard to get all of these pieces to match up together?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, it is complicated. And maybe your first, well, at least my experience when I was first getting my arms around it, what I thought the right math wasn't really the right math. And then you dig in a little further and you say, oh wait, there's lots of things to care for. In fact, yesterday I was helping somebody else think about how to price something related to workforce management, and he was asking me if I could just give him a quick estimate, like off the top of my head, of like what to expect. And I was like, yeah, give it a try. And he tells me what's going on, and I didn't realize, it took me a minute to realize what I was doing, but as I was thinking out loud, I listed probably 15 different things I needed to know to be able to give him a good estimate. And I was like, I stopped at the end. I was like, that's not what you asked for, but and I'm sorry that I can't give you something super simple, but unfortunately it is kind of complicated. And I could, you could send the staffing models, or pricing is a good way of thinking about it too. It could go so many directions, and there's so many variables, and they all interrelate a little differently. So to me, what I've learned is you have to really develop a feel for that, and you have to really try a lot of stuff, and spend probably way too much of your time in a spreadsheet or in some Erlang calculator to really feel how it goes. But for me, once I got the feel for it, I felt way more confident. But I think it's really important that you really base your understanding of workforce management, your forecasting, your staffing, your scheduling, all that, everything that goes into that, even your intraday management, into some like, again, base it on the science, and try to get to a point where you feel it. And then it starts to make sense. I can have those conversations with workforce people where we almost like complete each other's sentences because we all have a feel for the math. So the people that have the feel, I feel like are deeply they deeply understand it. And it's hard to get there. It takes a while. I'm sure it's a lot like anything that you have to practice at for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's both the science to it, and then there's the art, which is right, just kind of understanding little nuances and how they might impact things unexpectedly, and the scale, right? I think that's another piece that people don't understand, and you and I have talked about this before, that it's so much easier to deal with a really large amount of volume and to work through that on a workforce um, side versus, I have just a small amount of volume and, I think I only need a few people. And it turns out it doesn't work really well like that.
No, it's hard to run a smaller operation. I think you have fewer levers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always think about when I was working at Frontier, there would be times where we would maybe expect something we would need to be planning for. Maybe it was a pricing change to our customers, something to drive a bunch of volumes, just an example. And we look at it and say, how are we gonna meet that demand? And we'd go through these extensive. I'm sure the team was really annoyed at me for going through so detailed, but we identify, at one point, 50 or 60 levers, meaning little things that we can do that can get us there. When you have an organization of a couple thousand people, 50 or 60 levers, I could have probably had more. We were just coming up with the ones that we could actually work with. When you have, 5, 10, 20, 50 people, your options get a lot more limited. And it's frankly, it's a lot more expensive per call. When you look at how much work people are able to do, it's just there's this economy of scale consideration that gets a lot easier, like you said, with big numbers, and gets really kind of clunky with small numbers. So
Yeah.
definitely something in call centers you have to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, I think we both know this, but it's something that in general, people who aren't involved in contact, or maybe they just have a small business, right? And maybe they're looking for to set up their own internal call center, or maybe they're looking at an outsourcing partner. They may not realize that it gets actually pretty expensive when you're dealing with those smaller numbers versus those bigger numbers. You can actually deliver that service more efficiently and more cost effectively.
It's a really good point because the easy number to look at is the expense, right? So you could look at that and you say, "Oh, that's expensive,"
Yeah.
and you might shy away. In fact, I see it a lot where you look at the expense number, you say, "Well, it's crazy to spend any more to support my customers," or it might be so shocking that you just never want to actually put the money into it that it probably deserves. Um, and so you understaff, or you keep your hours of operation contained, something that's probably good for your expense line but not great for your customers. And what ends up happening is, which is more problematic and more of a silent kind of killer, is where your customers are, can't get a hold of you when they want to get a hold of you. And there's not a whole lot of surprise that we all are increasing our expectations around customer service. I mean, I can probably go on my phone right now and have a package delivered this afternoon, right?
Right.
So, like, we're not really interested in waiting. I think as customers, we expect, in some ways, companies to be there on our terms, not, I don't want it. We don't want it to be too difficult to work with the people we spend money with. And so I've seen, it's interesting. I've seen smaller contact center operations do like a 9 to 5 kind of schedule with a handful of people. And so, during the day, there's probably a lot of call volume and maybe there's a queue. But more interestingly, outside of 9 to 5 is actually when a lot of people call. And so we've done some modeling. It's like, oh, wait, there could be like 40% of your leads you might be missing because you're not picking up before 9 and after 5 or Saturdays or something like that. But when you start to extend your hours, especially, and then extend your days, you're going from a call center operation that might cost you a couple thousand a month to maybe 20 or 30,000. So to small
Right.
business, that's huge. So I think the trade-off really, that's a huge amount to spend, but did you make up for it because you got 40% more sales? I don't know, or
Right.
some percentage of sales. It's a hard thing to understand, and anyway, that's my perspective on it. I see that a lot with the smaller centers, and it's a tough balancing act.
It is. Yeah, I mean, lost revenue isn't something that's easily documented, right? If I
Oh
have
yeah,
limited hours of operation, or maybe even right from a service level perspective, when potential customers are calling in and they're waiting longer than they want to, and so they just hang up and they call someone else.
yeah,
It's hard to measure what you're losing out of that. Yeah, it's really easy to measure what the expense is going to be to be able to
yeah.
support extra business, but it's hard to measure what you might be losing. So it ShiftOff, this is the first company that you've just kind of started, right? Prior to
Yeah,
that, you had been just,
yeah,
working for the man, as we say.
yeah, for
So
sure.
tell me about that experience. Like, what has been the hardest thing about that, and then what's been the biggest pleasant surprise?
That's a good question. Um, so even though I've technically worked for the man, as you put it, uh, I've always kind of had this objective of mine to get to become an entrepreneur, legitimately an entrepreneur. I had an opportunity when I worked for Frontier. I mentioned a minute ago. It started off in the call center, but we ended up starting a company within Frontier. So it was very intrapreneurial, as a lot of people would call it. The advantages, you get to be a part of growing something. It's exciting. Everyone's wearing multiple hats, and we had some really good success. So I mean, it was a ton of fun. The other benefit to it is that you don't actually have to worry about payroll or cash flow or anything like that. So
Right.
it's a different, that's definitely a stressor that wasn't part of the equation, which is good. So I had a lot of fun doing that. I look at my career and I say, wow, that was tremendous. And then when I went to that biotech company, they were high growth, and again, same thing. I just love that environment where you're building something and you're sprinting. And so um, as as I sort of approached the end of my last, well, actually, when I realized that this whole problem hadn't been solved, actually, that's when I decided, man, this would be really interesting to explore. And so here we are. Um, being an entrepreneur now, it's it's a hard experience to put into words. It's I tell people I'm having, like, I don't know how I would be anything else at this point. Like it's just such a rewarding and challenging experience that where you kind of put yourself to the test. And so I that's, for me, that's the excitement. It Anyway, I don't know how to put it into words. One of the things I always say, though, is when you're an entrepreneur, that you're kind of, um, I don't know, I want to say alone, but there's not that many people next to you. Like when you're in a bigger company, you've got an organization that, everybody, bumping into each other in the hallway, or maybe before 2020. But you,
Right.
you have people around you. When you're an entrepreneur, it's easy to be by yourself. And so one of the things, if you see me, I'm in this like little phone booth thing. I'm actually sitting at a place called Embark Collective, which is in Tampa. It's actually the fastest growing startup hub in Florida. And it's backed by some really cool people. And for me, what I get out of it is, I can look around the room right now, and I see people, all now friends of mine, that we're all kind of going through the same stuff, and we run into the same challenges. And again, you can't delegate these challenges because that's you now. So you have to find your way through it. And so it's really nice to have a support around you, access to information that you never had before, connections to people that you wouldn't have known otherwise. It's pretty awesome. And actually, you know what? I'm not sure when we would have ever met had I not jumped into this. So it's been, from that perspective, I've made a lot of good friends and met a lot of great people along the way so far.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that I feel like one of the things that I've talked about because I have a history with it, and I feel like I can add value, that I talk about on LinkedIn and other places about the value of coaching and having someone to be able to help you work through things, right? A coach isn't there to tell you exactly what to do or to do it for you, but there's someone that can help you work through to make improvements or to make decisions. And it sounds like that environment is exactly what you're getting, is you're getting coaching from other people who are actually getting the same thing from you, which is great.
Oh, that's definitely a peer coaching element going on. What I forgot to mention actually is that there's like 12, probably the number wrong, but there's 12 advisors that are part of this community that I have access to. So like, if I need somebody, I need to talk to somebody who's experienced, I'm just making like an example, like setting up a C Corp. I've never done that before, right?
Right.
What do I need to know? How do I, make sure that I'm, doing stuff that we probably never, we kind of take for granted. Like, how do I make sure I'm paying my taxes, or, little detail stuff that you have to make sure you're doing right. So you have all these people around you to guide that have been there. And then on a more strategic level, to your point, it's real coaching. Like one of the coaches here says, well, I just sit here and ask questions. I said, well, just keep doing that because it forces me to think the right way. So coaching to me is you have to have it, or I personally have to have it. I think most of us do. It makes a big difference in your trajectory. So, if you're looking to sort of grow and become a better leader, better, whatever you're trying to become, I feel like having mentorship and people around you to help you kind of down that path, I think is crucial for sure.
So I'm curious, and I think we all recognize that the last, it's been a little over a year and a half now, is for most of us who are alive, has been pretty unprecedented, and the things that have changed are not things maybe that we ever thought about. I'm wondering if anything about the events of 2020 and kind of into 2021 have changed how you approach things or how you look at things, and what lessons maybe you've drawn from that.
That's a good question. I remember the first like 2 or 3 weeks of the pandemic. I had this realization that we had all been kind of going too fast. Like I was a little bit. Well, it was probably more personal, but I imagine there's a lot of people that can relate, that when we got that little pause where we were sort of hunkered down for a little bit, I think it opened, at least opened my mind to a better way of working. It's important to be about your family and your friends and home, and it really opened my mind to, or opened my eyes to, how much maybe some of that was lacking. And so, now the pendulum swings too, because then you do that for too long and you're like, okay, I'm kind of bored now. Let's go back and do some stuff. And that certainly happened. But I think what I'll personally never erase from my experience in that is the value of autonomy and control over your time, where you work, when you work, what you work on, and having some control over that, I think is important to me, and it appears to be really important to a lot of people, because we're seeing an evolution in the market, or in the labor market, where wages are certainly on the rise, and not here to say whether that's right or wrong. I think we've been underpaying a lot of people for sure, but then also to have the freedom to decide, at any level in an organization, what your work is like. I think that's a benefit I think we're going to walk away from, and I think when we solve it, I think we're all going to be a lot happier and more productive. So for me, that's probably the biggest takeaway professionally, for sure. And I think it changes a lot of how we all operate and how we should all be thinking about business. So to me, now there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for us all to figure this out.
Yeah, I know, personally, things changed pretty drastically for me. And, one of the things that you hit on was, that pause and kind of reflecting. I have found personally that I've been talking to people in my life that I have not talked to, some for decades, like literally just like, oh, okay, now, right, these Teams meetings and Zoom meetings are a thing. Not that they haven't been a thing, right? The technology's been there for a long time. And while our social life was kind of forced to change, it also opened up an opportunity to reach out to people that maybe, I can't go meet up at a bar and talk to, but we can just, sit and, share a drink and talk and catch up about life and those kinds of things that I don't think that would have ever happened had these events not transpired. I just don't think it would have happened. So
yeah,
I hear what you're saying there for sure. As far as, people reevaluating, I think that's pretty obvious. I think anyone who looks at the labor market today, lots of people will have different opinions on what that means and the causes behind it. But I think we can all agree that it's very real and it's a problem to be solved. And for every business, you have to be realistic about where things are today. You can complain about it and not do anything and suffer the consequences, or you can try and figure it out.
absolutely. Yeah, I think, I mean, call centers is just a great example of where I think there's an opportunity. I mean, coming from the workforce management side, I mean, like you said, a lot of people don't really like workforce management because these are the guys telling you what schedule you're going to work for the next month or two.
Right.
And if you're depending on maybe luck of the draw or maybe how long you've been somewhere or whatever the case may be, that schedule could be changing frequently or it could be not what you like.
Yeah.
And it's hard to balance that with family and other commitments and frankly like that those things really are important. So I do think call centers are going to have to figure out another way to sort of do this or maybe find new ways of maybe matching the needs and demands of the customer and the customer experience and potentially prioritizing, not potentially, you have to put more priority and more focus on the agent's experience. So anyway, the old way of doing things, I think, is going to have to get interrupted a little bit. And then I think, as far as that might sound pretty scary, but at the same time, if you can crack that code, imagine what that does to your customer experience. Imagine what it does to your business and how happy the people are that work for you. I mean, what's more important than that? So, again, I look at it as opportunity and exciting times ahead but I'm sure a lot of people are nervous because it's not evident. It's not really clear how to do that yet. So that's how I see potentially that our industry kind of evolving.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating to think about. So I'm curious, right? You've been in the contact center world in a variety of ways for quite some time now. Number one, like, what do you see as kind of emerging as the next new thing, aside from how we treat workforce? But number two, are there any major concerns that you have about the industry going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of my focus is on the staffing operations of it. Obviously, there's going to be really exciting things ahead for machine learning and AI, and I think that's going to be really interesting and great to watch unfold. But I think for me, what I'm mostly concerned about and interested in right now is back to the way we work. So I mean, I look at any outsourcing company right now. This is something I'm kind of talking with a lot of people about just to get their thoughts on. But I look at outsourcing companies. I say, especially ones based in the U.S. I say, well, man, it's going to be really hard for them to stay afloat for, right this moment with the wages we were talking about going up, with the, it's not as flexible in the revenue. You have to go back and renegotiate your rates and all this stuff, and it puts a lot of things in flux. And if I were in that position right now, I'd probably be trying to look for opportunities to sort of fix it, or keep my revenue, where I don't have to touch my revenue or touch my rates, and try to solve for things like staffing and quality in the back end. I really worry about that. That's more of a near-term thing. I think it's going to happen. I think we're all going to be we're all trying to solve that right now.
Yeah.
So as far as, long term, I think that the next probably 6 or 8 months might really shape the future of our industry in the U.S. I'm excited to see. It seems like there's an influx of new technology that kind of keeps popping up too. I think we're starting to see maybe people realizing that we haven't really rethought call centers in, I don't know, 30 years. So it seems like, this is an area of opportunity for technology to really make a big impact. So those are the kind of things on my mind right now. What about you? What do you think? I'm actually curious. I don't think I'm the expert here.
Well, I'm no expert either. Here's the piece that I think you touched on that I think a lot of people in the business may or may not recognize, and that's the difference between the financial impacts for outsourcers who are partners that are providing contact center services for some other business versus insourcers. So insourcers, the wages are probably increasing for everyone regardless, right? But as an insourcer, it's not just my contact center that I have to worry about from a wage standpoint, right? I've got other people in other parts of the business, but I also have some other controls on revenue, right? Whether that's increasing the cost of my services, or increasing the cost of my product, or finding other efficiencies within the business. There are a lot of ways that I can help offset those rising wages. But for outsourcers, as you pointed out, it's a little more challenging because it's harder for an outsourcer to reach out to their partner and say, well, you know what, we just had to raise all of our wages $1 an hour, so we're going to have to charge you more. Because typically, right, there's a contract. You may be in the middle of the contract. You may have just signed a contract a few months ago. And those companies are seeing their own internal wages rise. And the reason, often, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons that they reach out to outsourcers is for the flexibility and for that lower cost of that service from a wage perspective, right? It's less expensive for me to outsource than it is for me to insource. And when my outsourcer is saying, we need more money, that's a big challenge in that relationship. And so I think everyone is focused on getting creative, but the outsourcers are almost caught in a little bit of a bind because, like we talked about with workforce, they don't have as many levers to pull, right?
No, yeah, definitely not. Not right now. They're getting kind of squeezed out, I think.
Yeah.
I worry about it. I mean, being a financial model guy, I modeled this a couple, last week actually, and I was you take, these outsourcers aren't operating on, tons of margin. So any change in the cost of the agents, and by the way, agents are, you get 90% of the cost, or maybe, if I'd guess, is going to the agent. So as you might look at the insourcer or the brand saying, oh, my outsourcer's cost is going up. Well, that's really a reflection of the cost of the wages. And so but to your point, you come to a client that you've worked with for a long time, or maybe you just got into contract and you say, oh my gosh, we have to raise these rates. Well, it like restarts the process. Now you potentially rolling the dice on your business. It's not a conversation you want to have. I think I think the best case scenario is we find ways to do it better, or maybe find ways to sustain the rates and maybe address some of these staffing problems. I mean, I think the gig economy could play a role there for sure, because most of the costs, let's say 90, I'm just making up numbers now, but let's say majority of the operational cost of like staffing and planning for schedules and recruiting, back to all the things that go into making sure that you have the coverage you need, happen on the schedules that cover called the tails, right? Like it's like nobody really wants to work nights or weekends. I mean, I'm sure there's a few, but in general, these are really hard. And then not to mention, it's just hard to get the right amount of people right now anyway. And especially because if you're pressured on your P&L, then you might not be able to actually afford what the market is yielding right now for wages. So if you're capped out at, say, $13, $14 an hour, but the market's saying, no, it really needs to be 16, but you can't afford that, that's going to put you in a bad spot. But I think if you're able to come up with a more, let's say, optimized staffing model, where you're sort of matching, a core group of full-time people that work 9 to 5. Actually, they could pick their schedule at that point, because you've got this core group that can really do whatever you want, and then you use a gig economy model to sort of supplement and balance those hard to staff intervals, or those peaks, or the valleys, whatever it is you're trying to match your demand to. Well, suddenly I think you get to a point where you actually can support those higher wages. You attract way better talent because of that. The flexibility of creating your own schedule is, that's what people want. They want to have that control.
Sure.
And if you can do all that and sustain your margin and sustain your price point, I think you become deadly in the BPO market right now, because that's the problem everyone's trying to solve. Right. And there's not an obvious solution yet, but I think there's ways to do it. I really do.
So the agents that work for ShiftOff, are they all work from home? I assume they are
100% remote. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the work from home model, which has been around for a long time. I actually was on a panel earlier this summer, and we talked about it. And like when I got into contact center, the business back in, I hate to say this, 2009. That's how 2009. It was work from home then. Like it's not new, but a lot of things have advanced. And certainly over the last year and a half, I think everyone's aware that, work from home became this big thing for all kinds of different industries. Not every industry can do that, but a lot of industries, including contact centers, made a shift to work from home that a lot have been avoiding. And, I think there is some value there in that if contact centers are able to execute really well on work from home, then that also helps, because as an agent, I don't have a commute, right? I don't have to use the public restroom at wherever you are. I don't have the same kinds of HR issues. So when you're talking about a brick and mortar contact center, there are all kinds of potential HR landmines just all over the place. And if people are working from home, you avoid a great many of those things. So definitely a lot of advantages there.
Absolutely. I think there may have been like an apprehension for work at home before 2020. Not everyone. I think I've had some work at home vendors, but it was kind of a small segment, right? You wanted everyone in the office, but as you look at it, that was a problem. That's probably the biggest bottleneck in the whole thing. So if we can get past that, I think it opens up a ton of opportunities for again, where you match the customer experience to the agent experience. Work at home is a big part of that, for sure. And the more flexibility you can give people and still meet those demands, I think that's the path forward.
Yeah, good stuff. So, by the way, I do want to talk very quickly about the fact that I put out a poll to name this podcast And you did not name this podcast.
I did it because I think I might have voted for the one you chose. But you
No,
might have
no,
you.
no, you
I
didn't.
didn't.
You didn't.
Oh
No.
gosh. Did I get?
Revisionist history.
Yeah.
I see what you creative accounting. Is that what we're doing now? Oh, I think this is what the one I voted for.
This is the
Sure.
kind of creative accounting that doesn't put me in jail, which is good.
Right. Right. No, you voted for the title "Thank You for Calling,"
Oh, I did like that one too.
which was a tight number 2. It was really
Yeah.
close. There were really only 2 contenders. The other 2 that I had as options there lost soundly. It wasn't even close. I think there were like 3 or 4 total votes. So I just want to point out that maybe naming podcasts, you should just stay away from that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I can appreciate that for sure.
Okay, fantastic.
I do like your name though. Next in queue is great. I think it's perfect.
Well,
both were good. Both were good. It was a hard
appreciate
choice.
it. So you've been in queue now. So how's it been?
Oh, it's been phenomenal. It was a short wait time. Very well run operation over here.
Well, I am very proud of our average speed of answer here at Next in Queue. And Trevor, it's been my pleasure having you join me today. It's been enlightening, and I know that a lot of the topics that you've talked about are going to be really interesting to the tens of people who are listening to this podcast. So thanks for joining.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really good talking and hanging out with you.
All right, ditto. We'll talk again soon. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you.